had made my way to Bedrown. It was a long walk, especially for gnomish feet. I managed to make it safely to the path my new friend Oliver had told me about, and I had made it to the Bedronian city of Quotient. I thought that I would not be welcome considering Bedrown was predominantly human, but, to my surprise, they were very friendly. It wasn't long before I found myself at a tavern. The Munchy Moose. Best dish of poutine? I think that's what it's called. In town. And talking to a moose rider named Etienne, he told me of a tale of a legendary moose rider, Anithio.
On the outskirts of Padroon was Fort Hoofkick. It had been built as a defense against the hill giants, who were a constant threat in the land of Padroon. The captain of the fort was Sir Liam Gander. Liam was a tactical genius, which earned him the position. He was known for his ability to make the hard decision. On one particular day, he had to make a hard decision. There had been news of a group of hill giants to the east. Liam saw an opportunity to eliminate the threat by bringing a small force of his best men. Seemed like a no-brainer, but the catch was he had to leave some men behind, including his nephew Anithio. Anithio was a good boy. He really was. He always tried to please his uncle, emphasis on tried, but his inability to focus had some negative outcomes, like when he forgot to lock the moose stables. Or when he was sure he fixed Liam's wagon wheel. Or when he forgot to use a training spear for a training session. After a few too many incidents, Liam had to figure out what to do with Anithio. Until an idea struck him. Liam made his way to the training grounds, where some of the men were training. He looked around for Anithio. It didn't take long to find Anithio staring at a dummy with a spear in his hands. Liam's heart sank as Anithio, instead of practicing, was merely staring at his opponent blankly. Liam walked up to his nephew.
Anithio.
Anithio was startled and turned to look at his uncle, almost stabbing Liam with the spear. Luckily, Liam learned to anticipate his nephew's actions, so he was able to dodge the unintended blow.
Uncle, I'm sorry, my mind just...
It wandered, yes, I know. Listen, I need to talk to you. Come with me.
Liam and Anithio walked off together. Liam took Anithio to the barracks, where no one was for the moment.
All right, my boy, I have a special mission for...
Anithio continued walking without his uncle.
Anithio. Anithio.
Liam snapped his fingers. Anithio stopped, turned around, and found he had walked too far.
Oh, sorry.
Anithio walked back to his uncle.
Anyway, I have a special mission for you.
Anithio looked excited.
Really?
Liam nodded.
Yes, it's very important.
Anithio stared at his uncle in wonder.
What is it?
Have you ever done guard duty by the back wall?
Anithio shook his head.
No, I never have.
Well, you get to go to the back wall.
Anithio looked excited and nodded.
Great. What do I do?
Guarding it.
Oh, right.
Anithio thought about it for a moment.
Wait. The back wall faces the moat and the side of a mountain.
Liam was starting to get nervous.
True. And most people would think it's inaccessible.
I would agree with them.
Liam and Anithio stared at each other in silence. Liam managed to come up with some justification.
Which is the problem?
Anithio gave Liam a puzzled look, like a dog who didn't understand a command. Liam scrambled to explain his point.
You see, that is what our enemies would want us to think.
Anithio listened intently. Liam was excited that he had his nephew's attention. That was a hard fight unto itself. He just had to bring it home.
Our smarter enemies would take advantage of such an inaccessible path, thus making it the perfect pass for a sneak attack. In our confidence in its inaccessibility, we wouldn't expect a devastating attack from that position.
Liam looked his nephew in the eye in desperation that the young moose rider would buy it. He worried for a moment, until Anithio shrugged.
All right, I'll do it.
Thank you, my boy.
Liam put a hand on Anithio's shoulder.
You're doing your country a great service.
Anithio nodded and turned his attention to something on the ceiling.
Great! Say, has anyone else noticed that spider web?
I know it'll do me proud.
Liam walked away, with a sense of unease. Meanwhile, while Liam talked to Anithio, Brarg was talking to his fellow hill giants about his plans.
Moose riders will be coming.
The other hill giants growled at the mention of the dreaded moose riders. Brarg raised his hands to silence the other hill giants.
Calm, calm.
The hill giants quieted down to listen to their leader. Brarg continued his speech.
Now they not know they walk into trap.
Brarg had to calm his people down again.
Calm, calm.
The hill giants once again quieted down. Brarg continued.
While they here and busy, me and
Brarg counted on his fingers to make sure.
4 of me best men will go to Moose Rider Fort and surprise leftover Moose Riders. Kill 2 moose with 1 rock.
The other hill giants cheered. Liam rode across the hills and valleys of Padroon, the entire time with a strange feeling in his gut.
I hope we did the right thing.
What Liam and his men didn't notice was Brarg and his elite warriors spying on them from behind a large hill. Brarg addressed his men after the moose riders passed.
Those fools no notice us. We make our way to fort and surprise rest.
The elite warriors nodded and sneaked away, as well as giants could. Night fell over the fort. There was a handful of guards roaming around. Other guards roamed along the walls of the fortress. And Anithio stood at the back wall, staring at the side of a mountain. The only movement he noticed was that of a white bird. He watched it fly into the night sky. It looked so majestic and beautiful. Anithio wondered what kept it aloft. Where was the bird going, and what? Anithio shook his head.
No, Anithio. Focus. This is an important task.
Anithio stared intently in the direction of the mountain. He couldn't see how anyone would be able to get around it. But the moose riders had smart enemies, so he had to be vigilant. He looked up the mountain to the night sky, towards the stars. They shine beautifully in the sky. They were like shining, floating lanterns illuminating the night like... Brarg and his elite climbed a mountain. One of Brarg's elite, Ferg, looked up to his brave leader.
Great, leader.
Brarg continued climbing, but answered his subordinate in an irritated tone.
What?
You sure? Climbing mountain? Good idea?
Course it good idea. Moose riders not expect us come this way.
They think that, 'cause mountain is dangerous and killing us.
Ha! What you say? You my best warriors. No way mountain stop us.
We lost Pog.
Brarg looked down at Ferg in surprise.
What?
Ferg gestured his head downward. Brarg looked in that direction to indeed find Pog's body at the bottom of the mountain.
Anyways, we too far now. Let's go.
Anithio continued to stargaze. The grip he had on his spear began to loosen. Brarg and his elite were climbing down the other side of the mountain. They were making their way towards the moat. Brarg signaled to his elite. Brarg's men nodded and let go of the mountain. Anithio continued to look at the stars until a noise startled him. Anithio looked down at the moat.
Huh?
Brarg and his elite hit the water in the moat. It was surprisingly deep. Brarg addressed his men.
All right, man. We swim for wall.
One of Brarg's elite, Baal, started struggling and splashing in the water.
Brarg. Oh no, can swim.
Brarg was filled with terror.
What?
Anithio looked towards where the splashing was coming from.
What is that?
Brarg was trying his best to help Baal.
Come on. Stop fighting.
Baal ignored his leader's words as he fought to tread water.
You're drowning. You need help.
Brarg saw something he did not expect. There was a guard on the wall. There wasn't supposed to be a guard on the wall. Brarg had to think fast, which is not a strong suit for a hill giant. Brarg proceeded to shove Baal's head underwater. Anithio looked across the moat to try and find what was causing the splashing. He couldn't make out much in the darkness and the vastness of the moat until it sprang up. It was a giant rainbow bass that sprang up from the water and back into it. Anithio was delighted. He always thought the rainbow bass were such beautiful creatures. Their multicolored scales shined in the sunlight. In this case, the moonlight. They were just fascinating creatures. He thought it must have come from the nearby lake. There were a lot of interesting creatures in the lake. Anithio started to recount all the interesting creatures in the lake. Brarg saw that the stupid guard was distracted.
He distracted. You come back up now.
Brarg took his hands off Baal's head, but Baal did not come back up. Brarg looked to his elite, at least what was left, Ferg and Yar, who stared back at him in horror. He pointed at them aggressively.
We don't talk about this.
Anithio soon grew bored watching the fish and went back to looking at the stars. He thought he saw the fish constellation. He tried to remember its name. Brarg and what was left of his elite swam up to the wall. Brarg pointed to Yar.
Yar.
Brarg pointed to the wall.
You climb first.
Yar nodded, looking very nervous. Yar swam up to the wall and began scaling the wall. Anithio continued to stare at the stars.
Pyceres! That's it!
Anithio was so excited about remembering such an important fact when he went to lean on the wall but discovered the wall wasn't a wall but the tip of his spear. He discovered this as he felt the pain shoot through his arm as the spear tip pierced it.
Ow!
The pain caused Anithio to drop his spear over the wall. Brarg and Ferg watched Yar climb the wall.
You're a very good climber.
Brarg looked at Ferg. Ferg merely glared at Brarg.
You still mad about Baal? Get over it.
It happened seconds ago.
Yar climbed a wall. He stopped as he heard something. Yar looked up to see Anithio's spear falling towards him. He only had time to gasp. As the spear pierced through his head, skull, brain, and to more skull and head. Brarg and Ferg stared up, watching Yar.
Why he stop?
As if to answer Brarg, Yar fell off the wall and into the moat below. Brarg and Ferg looked at Yar's body floating in the water with the spear in his head. The two hill giants that were left stared back at each other in horror. Anithio looked over the wall, confused and curious.
That was a loud splash for a spear.
Brarg looked up to find a guard looking over the wall.
Oh no. Hope he don't see us.
Brarg went to look at Ferg,
We.
only to see the last of his elite swimming away.
Where you going?
Far from terrible plan.
Anithio looked down to see a hill giant swimming in the moat.
Oh my god! Hill giants!
Brarg looked up as he heard the guard shout. He saw the guard run off.
Damn it. Hell with it.
Brarg started climbing. Anithio ran down the steps.
Giants! Giants!
Anithio made his way towards the armory. Brarg climbed a wall as quickly as he could. Brarg started climbing. Anithio ran into the armory, still sounding the alarm.
There's giants! The hill giants!
Anithio rifled through a weapons rack until he found a new spear.
Got you!
He proceeded back to the wall. Brarg continued his determined climb up the wall. Anithio made his way back to the wall. He was not paying attention, for he did not see the upturned stone in his wake and tripped,
Whoa!
causing him to send his new spear flying through the air. Brarg finally made his way to the top of the wall. As he came over the wall, he saw a spear sailing towards him. Brarg could only say,
Son of a...
before the spear pierced through his head, his skull, and brain. Brarg, the great hill giant leader, was dead. His body fell back from whence it came. Anithio looked up from the ground to see no hill giants. He was very confused.
Huh?
Sir Liam and his moose riders rode back after their victory over the hill giants. Sir Liam and his moose riders approached the fort. In the distance, Liam saw some moose riders wheeling a dead hill giant, Brarg, and a few more moose riders lead a living hill giant in chains, Ferg. Liam looked at this display in shock.
What the hell did I miss?
I thank the Moose Riders for their hospitality and story. They sent me on my way towards Lingland, home of the Halflings. I was provided with some, provisions and a small horse. I rode off seeking my next story.